Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are here with Dr. Liz DeBetta, correct? All right.
Yeah.
It's all right. Yes, I didn't mispronounce her name. But yeah, welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Ryan Aranda here, my best life Paraguay. And I'm excited to have this conversation here today with Liz. And so this is going to be a bit different than my travel content, than, showing you guys Paraguay. Might not be for everybody, but I know that there are quite a few people who are interested in adoption related topics. So yeah, it's great to have you here. And I found Dr. Liz on when I was searching up mental health statistics for adoptees, and then a short popped up when you were part of a podcast. And that podcast, if you could, what was that the other podcast? I'll link it down below for you guys if you want to check that out as well. But that was the four. Um, I'm forgetting the name. Uh, anyways, anyways, I found a full video on Liz's story and her current work that she'll get into in a second here. But to bring more of an academia element to talking about some of this stuff that I brought up in my own story, um, you know, being adopted, the complexities of it, growing up in the States, being an international adoptee, and all that. Um, and Dr. Liz has a very similar story. So, but different as well. So she'll dive into that. But before that, if you want to just introduce yourself and also the work that you're doing around adoption, your thesis, and then everything you've done up in your academic career, professional career. You're also doing a lot of other crazy stuff, cool stuff. So if you want to just dive into who you are and what you're doing, and then we can get into the rest.
Awesome. I'm so glad to be here with you, Ryan. And yeah, the other podcast is also escaping me, but we'll look it up and we'll put it in the comments in the show notes. But yeah, so
Sorry, you guys, we had some difficulties, but forgive me. And Dr. Liz is DeBetta is gonna start again with their introduction from the start here. So hopefully we won't run into issues, but just in case, we're gonna try to get through this.
yeah, that's what we do. So yeah, hi all. I'm Dr. Liz DeBetta, and I consider myself a scholar, artist, activist. I'm an adoptee, and I am the founder and creator of Migrating Toward Wholeness, which is a trauma-informed, arts-based, and evidence-based framework and methodology for healing through writing, storytelling, and embodied performance and somatic practices, which really comes out of my own experience as an adoptee. Um, and using creativity, both writing and theater, for many years of my life as tools to help myself heal without recognizing that I was doing that. And then when I got into adulthood, I recognized that I felt very stuck and something needed to shift. And then I had not interrogated my experience as an adoptee. And so I got very interested in the field of therapeutic writing and writing as a tool for healing, and also how that could work in tandem with other arts like theater and performance. And so that's what led me to write and perform my now award-winning solo show Unmothered, which is the foundation of what it is now, Migrating Toward Wholeness, because I made myself the subject of that research. And then I took Unmothered and the foundation that I had built there and did a pilot program with the Red Adoption Research Institute back in 2021, where I did a Writing to Heal group with a group of adult adoptees. And that led me to write my book, Adult Adoptees and Writing to Heal, which allowed me to name and frame the whole Migrating Toward Wholeness process and develop a set of tools that I now use on a daily basis to support people, particularly adoptees and those affected by the trauma of adoption, to take back their stories and reclaim their voices and find more agency, healing, and wholeness. Because I think that, the most important thing that I can do in this life is to help others that are impacted by trauma to continue to reclaim their voices and rewrite the stories that have been imposed upon us. Just and that's because I believe that more stories equal more connection, and more connection equals more healing.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. And yeah, that's why I try to share my story as well, through these YouTube videos. Um, and as you know, many times when you are younger, or even as a young adult, or really any age, you can feel really alone, in this process. And, would you say it's true also that, um, when we were growing up, there certainly wasn't as much of a dialogue about any of it really from the parents' end, from the adoptees' end, that we have different struggles than non-adoptees. Would you say it's in the last 10 years or so that there's much more uh, research done, around these topics?
Yeah. So I think, I think I'm a little bit older than you. I was born in 1977, so I'm 48 now. And I will say, yes, there's certainly more movement in the last decade in terms of adoptee visibility and adoptee story visibility. And many of us who have come into adulthood over the last 10-ish, decade or so, that are stepping into spaces of empowerment and telling our stories. The research, from that, that perspective, like the research has been available since the late, starting in the late 70s, but it was like very early days in the late 70s when the research started to bubble up. And then really we didn't get any of the significant research probably until the early 90s, at least based on the research, and the work that I have done. For example, the Primal Wound, the book by Nancy Verrier, that is really helpful for a lot of adoptees in understanding like why we feel the way we do, was published in 1992, I think. I'm pretty sure that's the date. I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the date because I reference it a lot. And so if you think about that in the context of our lifespan, right, like that, or those early 90s, if, unless you were looking for the information, you didn't know to go, you didn't know it was there, right? It wasn't like it was readily available. It wasn't like we had YouTube either, right? So the more that we have social media platforms and other media platforms that are making these stories like widely available, the more we are exposed to them. But 30 plus years ago, we didn't have the ability to like get on Zoom and record a YouTube video that we could then post and broadcast to the world about these stories. So the world is definitely very different than it used to be, even just 10 years ago, but certainly 20 or 30 years ago when I was struggling to figure out who I was and what my place in the world was. And it's true, like so many of our families were not equipped to have any kind of conversation about the experience of being adopted because they didn't, they didn't know. Nobody told them that adoption was a lifelong trauma, that there was that there were going to be issues, right?
Yeah. 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 And, it is quite a thing to now have the internet and to see more stories popping up, for sure. And yeah, it does heal just by the simple fact that you're not alone anymore. You're not the only one who went through it, who's going through it, who's going to continue to go through it. Yeah, which is a big reason why we have you here today. So if you can back up for us to your childhood. So you are American born, you're okay, but you also grew up in an American family, correct?
Yep.
And can you also tell the terminology that you like to use as well, and kind of put that into the whole conversation? Because I know that you have used certain words that are interesting when you talk about this stuff. So
Yeah, thank you so much for acknowledging that. Yeah, and I think language, I know that language is so important in the context of everything, but certainly in the context of adoption, and the adoption experience. And my language has evolved tremendously over the years. And so, um, I'll take you back a little bit in a minute, but just to speak to the language part of things, my language has definitely evolved. But right now, at this point in time, the term that I prefer to use for my biological mom is my first mom. She's my first mom. That's true for me. I also like the term family of origin or first family, as opposed to birth mom, birth family. And that's simply because for me, in my experience, those other terms like birth mom or birth family still feel really dehumanizing. And there's so much language in the culture of adoption that is really dehumanizing, that erases the humanity of first mothers and families of origin, and it, as a result, prohibits adoptees from being able to be curious and ask questions and get answers about where we came from and who we are. And so for me, early, remind me what the first part of your question was, so I can accurately get to it.
well, yeah, just bringing us up on your upbringing.
Right.
Yeah, for me, it's a little different growing up as an international adoptee in an American household.
Yes.
Grew up as an American.
Yes.
And you also, what I understood listening to your last podcast, you didn't necessarily look too different from your family. So if you could understand that
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the reminder. Yeah. So I was a white kid adopted into a white family, right? And that's sort of really in a lot of ways a throwback to earlier American adoption culture, right? Post World War II, where the conventional wisdom was that you could match babies and families. And so, like, if you were putting a white baby in a white family, and if that baby was blonde and blue-eyed and the parents were blonde and blue-eyed, then those parents wouldn't necessarily have to tell that child that child was adopted. So there was this sort of like culture of passing. And I think that bled into subsequent decades. And like a lot of like, so my experience is that like my parents adopted me, and I have another brother who's adopted, and we were both, white kids adopted into this white family. And we looked just enough alike that it wasn't, unless you knew that we were adopted, it wasn't obvious, right? And so even though my parents were really great early on about telling us that we were adopted, like I don't ever remember not knowing that I was adopted. Like I know for as long as I can remember, right? It was a thing that I have always known. But then sometime after my younger brother, who's my parents' biological son, was born, and my younger brother has Down syndrome. And so he was born in 1982, and that in the US just after deinstitutionalization, which is when they took all of the handicapped or, developmentally and intellectually disabled people, or were starting to, at any rate, take them out of institutions. They had previously been institutionalized and like treated like animals. And it's like another horrible part of American and Western history. But because he was born just at this point in time where nobody knew what to do with people like him, the focus of my family really shifted into his needs. And because my parents weren't aware of the needs that their other adopted children might have as a result of the trauma of maternal separation and being separated from any kind of knowledge about our history and origins. We just stopped talking about adoption. It just became a thing we didn't talk about. And partly because my parents didn't know we needed to keep talking about it, partly because they didn't have any information to give us, partly I think because they were kind of afraid of the conversations that might come up. And so it was easier to avoid it. And because my brother and I looked enough alike to them, it became a non-issue, right? And I know so many adoptees who are transracial adoptees and international adoptees who don't look like their families because like your ethnicities and your biological heritage is very different. And like, there's a difference there because like, you can't not acknowledge it, right? In that circumstance. So it's like there's a weird tension there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that explanation. And yeah, I mean, even though to a lot of people looking in, oh, you guys are similar looking enough, there can't be anything internal going on type deal, where maybe, I grew up Latino looking, very mestizo looking in a white family. It was very obvious that me and my sister were adopted from somewhere else. But even us, or actually probably speaking for myself, I had a little bit of white proximity rather than like, and a little bit, not completely.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily like a white privilege, but like a white proximity that, I could see maybe, maybe by some chance. But then I also kind of, I hate that I have to admit this, but kind of lying at certain points in my life, like just because it was such a long conversation. So like the people, because I have a very Polish last name, even though I look very Latino. And I use my birth name for my channel, or first birth name, where you were saying that terminology. But yeah, so for me it was a little bit different. There's more friction, but also I know that it was harder for Black kids who grew up with white families, right? Because it was almost even a bigger thing. But going back to me feeling kind of bad when I would lie sometimes, I'd just be like, yeah, I'm half and half. I'm half Polish, half Paraguayan, or something like that. Because otherwise I find myself in this big story all the time, like explaining who I am 20,000 times over. I'm from Paraguay. Where is Paraguay? Oh, is that in like Africa or Europe or something? No, it's not. And when did you come here? And and so to avoid that story, I feel bad when I was younger. I don't do it anymore. But just like a simple lie or something like that. Oh, I'm just half and half or something like that.
Yeah, but it's so complicated, right? And I'm so glad you said that because, like, yeah, that's the difference. Like my family got to pass, and we didn't have to have that complicated conversation. Except that the complicated conversation was, like to your point, was happening inside of me, right? Even though on the outside everything matched, more or less, put that in quotes. On the inside, it didn't. But I didn't know how to articulate that, right? And so I resonate very deeply with what you're saying because like that having to like manufacture some kind of story to make it make sense to other people is exhausting, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, let me come up with something that makes this easier for me because like otherwise I'm going to spend my whole life trying to like validate my existence, right? And that's the thing, as adoptees, like we spend so much of our lives trying to validate our existence instead of actually truly living. And that's the thing that I have worked really hard to come to is, and that's why I do, what migrating toward wholeness is really all about is like the validation of like, I get to be here, I get to tell my story, I get to own that story, however it's true for me, and then I get to help guide other people to whatever their own stories are outside of the complicated nature of what has been thrown at us because of being adopted.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so I also do have a brother who is the biological son of my parents as well. And we're just a year apart, so we were always kind of had similar friend groups or whatnot throughout the years. But for like new people who didn't know us, we say we're brothers. No way, no, you're not. So we'd have to spell our last name at the same exact time. 12-letter Polish last name to get people to, oh, okay, yeah, they're brothers, because so even I just remember things like that growing up too, that they were kind of funny at the time, but then when you go back and think about it, it's like, damn, I had to do that way too many times,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
yeah, so there's all those and I was saying, can you explain the difference between what were the terms you used, transracial and international? I guess I don't know the difference.
Oh yeah. So international, like, and sometimes they're like both, right? Like you can be a transracial and international adoptee. So international adoptees are adoptees that are adopted into the United States from other nations, right? And then transracial adoption describes adoption that is across race, right? So like white families adopting children of color is just in the most simple form. Okay. Whereas if I were to tell, like, my adoption identity would be domestic infant adoption, same race domestic infant adoption, right? I was adopted in the United States into a same race family as I was.
Okay, got it. Okay, interesting. What was the other thing? That was I remember you said in a podcast. Again, I'm mixing these up because I listened to like to 2 or maybe 3 of them when I was doing yard work. So I had machines going, but I would try to listen in. But one interesting thing that you said was parents should let their kids know as young as possible, all the way down to the age of 3, I believe you said. That they adopted, and that should not be a secret, because they should conclusion that they need to own their adoptedness at the youngest age possible, as well as correct.
Yep. Yeah, and this comes from research from a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Amanda Baden, who's at Lothair State University. She's an adoptee and an adoption studies scholar, and who has done research on when is the best time to tell a child that they're adopted. And all the research says that it is very important to let children know as early as possible before the age of 3, because beyond that, then there can be complications with identity development and like, I'll put this in really simple terms, sort of like what they term overall life satisfaction, which is like a very broad term for going through life feeling like you don't belong, like you're not good enough, like like there's something wrong with you. Yeah. So it's really important. And this comes out of like decades of research from adult adoptees who were not told that they were adopted, many of whom found out that they were adopted when their parents died, and they found paperwork while they were, cleaning up parents' homes and like sorting through files. And then they were like, oh, no wonder I have felt out of place my whole life. I am actually adopted, right? And there's a history of this, particularly in the United States. There's a history of secrecy and silence around adoption, which brings up a whole other like host of questions, right? And host of topic of conversation around like, oh, why is that? But it's really, it's really important for children to know from the beginning, because then it can be integrated as part of their identity, as opposed to having to be something to grapple with later, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I'd agree. And yeah, I guess I didn't know how common it was for that to remain a secret all the way through adulthood in the U.S. As
Oh yeah,
impressive to me, because
yeah,
this is one thing that you can't really hide from an international adoptee. Like, it's pretty obvious, you know. But you maybe
right.
in your case, if you didn't talk about it ever, maybe you would have never known, or
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Like, and this is something I've also learned in work, like getting to know and love and work with so many other adoptees. The term is late discovery adoptee, right? Like, there's so many late discovery adoptees. These are people that, and that's a term that, like, anytime you find out, and I think I might be misremembering the exact number, but like, anytime you find out after the age of, like, I don't know, 8 or something like that, like, it's considered a late discovery adoptee. But for many people, it's considerably later. They do not find out until well into adulthood, as I said, either after parents die and they are tasked with going through, belongings and files and things, and they find paperwork, and then they have the biggest surprise of their life. I actually had a neighbor growing up when I was younger, in the neighborhood I grew up in, who was adopted, and the parents decided to tell him on his wedding day. Not excellent timing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like, I don't know what, I can't even begin to imagine what that, like, train of thought was about. Like, what, today's the day. Like, he's getting married and we're going to tell him, by the way. Ooh, right? Like, some parents we'll wait till they're 18 and then we'll tell them. Like, and it's this bizarre dance of, like, not dealing with discomfort, right? And not wanting to have a hard conversation. So, which is why I'll take it back to why it's really important to have that conversation early and often, because then we normalize it, right? It's just a part of the experience. Like, this is our family. This is the situation. This is part of your identity. And as that child grows up, we can have better conversations about and ask, and open space for questioning and curiosity, instead of like secrecy and hiding.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting parallel, right? That us international adoptees wouldn't experience that. But when like in my case, when I met my biological family here in Paraguay, there's a whole nother level of secrets that I opened myself up to down here. So, in fact, actually, yeah, if we could jump into that, people know my story, and if you don't, you can look at past videos and stuff. But if you could jump into your story now of reuniting your birth mother, that'd be great. And then, we can dive into subtopics around that. But yeah, if you could explain how that went down, what the stage you were in life, what you were working on. I think you were finishing up your PhD at that point.
Yeah, I was partway through. I was actually at the very beginning of my PhD when I first met my first mom. I had It was so sort of the beginning of my healing journey, my journey back to myself, my journey to healing and wholeness, to discovering all of the parts of me that had not felt present for most of my life. And so I reconnected with my birth mom on my 40th birthday. And what happened was I had started my PhD in at the, was about to start, or I was actually about to start my PhD. Like I had applied and I was like, this is the thing I'm going to do. And then at the same time, my partner had given me a DNA test for Christmas. And because I was ready, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to start searching. Like, I feel like I have spent most of my life curious, but not having the ability to do this. And now, now I'm at that point, I was almost 40 years old. I was like, I'm in a different place in my life. And I feel like I have the capacity to start to figure this out and handle this. So I did the DNA test at Christmas. And then coincidentally, I was, looking, scrolling through one of the adoption focused Facebook groups that I was part of at the time. And somebody had posted an article that said New Jersey had changed the laws. And I was like, oh, what's this? Because I was adopted in New Jersey. And I read the article and it had said that, as of X date, January, whatever, 2017, New Jersey has changed the laws to allow for restricted access to original birth records. So essentially what that meant was that I could fill out the paperwork and request a copy of my original birth certificate from the state, and then get that copy of my original birth certificate if my biological parents had not redacted their information. So I was like, okay, well, might as well, send them the money, fill out the application, see what happens. On my 40th birthday, in the mail was a copy of my original birth certificate. It was a snowstorm. I remember because we were supposed to go out to dinner that night and I had been working from home, and my partner had called me to check in. And I was like, can you just pick up Thai food on the way home? And by the way, I got the envelope, and I was like sitting on the counter because I remember going out around lunchtime to get the mail, like tromping through the snow to the mailbox and then like putting it on the kitchen counter because I wasn't going to open that until he got home. And, then he came home, we had dinner, and I opened this envelope and it was like, and now I know who my first mom is. Like, she has a name, she's a real person, and I can like figure out how to contact her. And like within 20 minutes, we were like internet, Google, whatever, Facebook. And we found it was very easy to find her. And it took me probably about a week or so to figure out what I wanted to say to her before I actually reached out. And then I sent her a Facebook message, and then I hand wrote the same message and put it in the mail in case she didn't check her Facebook messages, because who knows, right? And sometimes like those messages go to weird places. And so, and then I waited, and she got back to me and she said, I have been waiting 40 years for this, and I'm so happy to hear from you. And so that was in March of 2017. And so we started talking and, had a lot of like back and forth with Facebook Messenger initially, and then email. And then we started talking on the phone, and then we met for the first time in person that summer in July of 2017. And that was also quite by accident as well, because I just happened to be visiting and having dinner with a friend in like 5 minutes away from where she lived. And I realized it as I was driving there. I was like, wait a minute, my first mom lives here. And then when I got to the parking lot of where I was meeting my friend, I Googled the address and I was like, she's literally 5 minutes down the road. So I was like, maybe I'll text her. Maybe I'll see if she wants to meet me later.
Wow, that close, huh?
Yeah. And so just like sometimes the universe like puts you in the right place at the right time. And I think there was a lot of, sort of serendipitous moments that enabled us to connect and be together. Um, and, but it's been a slowly progressing relationship, right? Because it's really hard and bizarre and unnatural to have to develop a relationship with the person who is responsible for giving you life, right? With your mother who gave birth to you at 40 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was 21. But yeah, it was a hell of a thing, to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then if you could speak on just also to, because I know that everybody's at a different place with this stuff of like feeling the need to maybe go down the path to meet your biological parents, maybe not, or maybe super hard feelings with some sense when you're really young. If you could, and then I guess if you do, and once you do, what do you do? Like, what do you do with that responsibility? What do you do with that new feeling, that new, and I know what I do, but I just want to hear what you, what your take is on all this. Like, where should people be at? And is it okay to be at different stages with this stuff? And also, when you do, like, what is your next responsibility after that?
Yeah. These are such good questions and like such a good conversation to have, because I think we're all entitled to our own version of the journey and to our own experiences and to come at things as we're ready. And some people might not ever want or be ready for reunion, right? For entering into that new territory of a relationship with this person. Because it's, there's I think I'm going to say on the back end of it, right? And the sort of deeply entrenched cultural narrative is that like we were discarded, right? Like we were given up, right? She did like, and for some people, they really deeply internalized the narrative that I wasn't wanted, right? And so if she didn't want me, then why would I want to find her? Right. And that I've seen that in some adoptees that I know, that this like deeply held belief. Right. And so they're going to be fine moving through life without ever searching, without ever knowing. And that's their right. Right. But then there's those of us like me and like so many other people, like my whole life, I always wanted to know who she was, who who I looked like, where I came from, what the story was. Like I needed to know that information in order to move forward. And so like, I think it's important for all of us to know ourselves and to understand our needs and our wants, and to recognize that the search and reunion process is complicated. It's another layer of complication in an already complicated life. And to make sure that we have the appropriate support in place. I was fortunate that at the time that I finally was ready to search and make connection and contact, that I had a really stable, secure, loving, supportive relationship that grounded me, right? And that I had an adoption and trauma competent therapist as a support. And then I had a network of other people, many dear friends and other people who understood the complicated nature of my journey to hold space for me as I did that. I also had a network of other adoptees who had already been through that, who I could talk to, right? I also had a deep well of education. I educated myself. So I think it's important to have a community, have a network of support, educate yourself about all of the potential, like risks and rewards, shall we say, of the experience, and just have like the opportunity to be introspective and decide, like, is this something I'm ready for? And you don't have to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And also, what you do with the information once you do find out. So like, for example, I also have a sister who's adopted from Paraguay, not blood related, not biological related. So similar to your case as well, having another adopted brother, but not.
Yeah.
And for the first me, I immediately started coming down here. Like I linked up on Facebook, got in touch, and that's something also I didn't ask you. Do you have siblings, or do you know if you have siblings from your first mother?
Mm-hmm. I do. I have three half siblings. We share the same mom, different dad. They all have the same dad. And my sister, who was the next oldest, unfortunately, like and unexpectedly died a couple 3 years ago, which is something I haven't still fully processed, because she and I had been developing a relationship and had very similar had made very similar life choices and had very similar viewpoints and like sort of ethics and values, and I was, like I had just moved to Michigan where I live now, and I was really excited because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be finally like resettled in a place and a little bit closer to her, and now we're gonna have more time to like spend, go on like a sister weekend and like travel together and spend time together and get to know one another, because both of us were child free by choice. And then I got a phone call from our mom, that she was gone, and I actually like felt that like in a way that I have not felt anything else in my life. Like I felt in like in here, like like deep in my gut, I was like, I felt the physical response to listening to the message that my first mom had left me to tell me that she was gone, and I was like, holy shit, right? Because it was the first person that I was biologically connected to who wasn't, who was no longer here.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the things that I use the term collateral damage in adoption a lot. And that's part of, I think that's one of the things that I consider the collateral damage of adoption, is that like I had the beginning of a relationship that then got cut short. And that's maybe like a sad story to tell, but to the answer to your question. But yes, I do have some siblings. I have two half brothers as well.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's something I didn't hear you elaborate on the last time. But yeah, so a couple points. What I was just to finish up the last thing we were talking about is my sister, who I grew up with. She's more fine. She was more fine staying in contact just via social media. And then again, I mean, I live 7,000 miles away in Paraguay, so it's not exactly a state over, or a town over. So, it's a huge commitment. But I wanted to come in person, so I started coming every single year after that. So I just bring that up because there's different ways that you can approach once you get a packet of information, or just a name, your case, or a birth certificate that you can go out and research and expand on. And then from there, there's a lot of unexpected things as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Just the siblings part that you brought up too. Well, a couple things to that. I had siblings down here as well. I stay in the most closest contact with my sister, and then when I met her, I was also meeting my niece and nephew at the same time, and then eventually had another nephew as well, which adds on layers to the whole like now you have a new family, now you have new responsibility, which is why I kind of asked you that question before. Uh,
Yeah.
what do you do with this information? Like it's a big journey that's gonna be beyond just most likely just your birth mother. Uh,
Yeah,
and yeah,
for
uh,
sure. I think it's like boundaries, right? Like we have to learn like what are our boundaries and like and how do we manage the relationships in a way that feels right
mhm,
for us
mhm,
over time. And like you know, there are some relationships that just unfold and develop really naturally and effortlessly. And you're just like, that I know this is the right thing and this feels right and it's okay. And then there are like some extended family relationships that feel overwhelming, right? Because there's people that potentially are like, oh my God, we haven't had you in our life for all these years and we want to welcome you. And you're just like, I don't know how to handle this because like my nervous system is freaking out. And, so it comes back to really knowing ourselves and being able to manage and set boundaries around like what it is that feels okay so that we can manage the relationships in a way that feels healthy and manageable as opposed to letting ourselves be, I'm going to say, steamrolled, right, by other people's needs and wants. Because that's a thing too. Like as adoptees, we spend so much time and so much of our lives like being people pleasers and like saying yes to stay safe and to like fit in and to like not rock the boat. And so that can bleed over into these new relationships in our adult lives. And we don't want to replicate those patterns. So we want to be just being aware of that so that we don't continue to abandon ourselves.
yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. One thing I do want to touch on is when that news came to you, uh, unfortunately that one of your siblings didn't make it. Were there more unexplainable things that you felt at certain times in your life in your youth, at certain points, maybe dreams even? That's one thing I talk about in myself. But like I was having, for example, I was having two specific dreams. One that literally my, like you say, first mother, which is interesting because I know that First Nations, the Canadians use that for like for Indigenous tribes or their
Mhm.
first people. They don't say reservation, they say First Nation, all that. So uh interesting a parallel there. But yeah, so I had dreams growing up. One was when my birth mother came to visit me, just said I love you, all that. I couldn't even put an age on it anymore. But also when I was in my youth, I always knew that I had a biological sister that came to me
Mm.
in dreams, and like we would like play on the playground, but it was always like gibberish. It was never English, which later I would interpret that as being Spanish
Uh-huh.
until I learned Spanish later in life. Those were dreams that stuck with me. Those were more than just dreams. There's one
Yeah.
I won't get into, but that happened to me later in life, connected to my biological father. But those ones growing up were really powerful because I was like, these aren't just like some nightmare or something. These are, I know that somebody's trying to communicate with me here. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go into that, and I'm not trying to turn too many people off, and but
No, no, no. I mean, thank you for speaking that into being in this space and for sharing that because I think there's so much power in our embodied knowing, right? I mean, and that's 100% like how and why I've been able to like heal myself and how and why I've been able to help other people heal because and through the process of migrating toward wholeness because because I know that we have so much embodied knowledge that if we learn to listen to it, can tell us really important things. And I think dreams are one of them. I can say that my experience is that I have always known for my whole life that if and when I was going to find my first mom, that she would want to know me. I knew this. Like it was just like a very deeply held internal truth. Like I knew it in my bones. And so even though it was like a little nerve-wracking when I finally like had her name on a piece of paper and then like looked her up and was like, oh, she's a real person. And then had to figure out, well, what is it I'm going to say to her? I knew that she was going to respond in a very positive way, because I knew that she wanted to know me like that. So that's a deeply held knowing that I've had my whole life. I don't like my dreams, like I have had recurring nightmares for most of my life, and which don't happen anymore because of a lot of deep healing work, including EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and my own work. But I used to have this nightmare, and happened for like at least 20 years, where I would start, like I would start the like dream at an event or like showing up somewhere with a person, usually my partner that I was with at the time. And then we would get separated, and I would spend the rest of the dream like desperately searching. Like, so it would be if we showed up at a house party and then we got separated, and then I would spend the rest of the dream desperately searching for like, where did he go? Where is he? I'm just trying to find him. Did you see him? Did you like, and then over the years it morphed into like things like, then I would go upstairs and I would open a door, and then I would be like and then there would be like an escalator, and there would be elevators. And there's actually a scene in my show Unmothered about this, because it was such an integral like part of my experience that like disrupted my ability to like function, because I would have these nightmares and they felt so real that I would be like desperately searching for this person, or this thing that I would never find. And then I would wake up like really exhausted and like just, in the show I say full of raw emotion, vulnerable and scared, right? Like not knowing like if feeling like what had just happened was so real. And so then like the whole next day, I would feel like shit, like physically and emotionally and psychically, because I couldn't separate myself from what I had just experienced in that dream world. And that happened for years. And it's because I was looking for my mom.
Yeah.
I was looking for myself. Right?
Yeah, that's very powerful. Yeah, there's a lot of unexplained stuff when you're connected to people and you don't know that connection, and you're searching internally. Yeah, what would you say are, I mean, I kind of know just because of my own life, but the way, I guess, differences that maybe girls or different challenges that girl adoptees versus boy adoptees. I don't know if this is part of your research. Like, I know for a fact that, I've spoken to a couple of guys who are adopted now. We got really into the physical sports, but sometimes we were also very rebellious, and we had issues growing up, and some of those carry to adulthood, not all of them, but I don't know if it's similar for young girls. And is there any crossover kind of, or are there differences?
Yeah, I mean that's such an interesting question because I can only, like it's not something that I have dedicated any research time to. And so like I'm sure other people have. I can speak from the lens of my own experience, which is that like from the perspective of growing up with my brother who's also adopted and having read a lot of research that like there are typically in the psychology of adoption, there are typically two types of adoptees, one of which is the compliant adoptee, right? The one who does all the right things and like checks all the boxes and, like like me, like generally, like I was the overachiever. I won all the awards. I did all the right things. I was the peacekeeper, and then my brother was on the other side of this, the sort of the other side of that scale, and he was the disruptor. He was you know the hellraiser, if you will. He was always sort of pushing the boundaries and like see and like and from a so I would say that like I don't know 100% how gendered that is because I do know um women adoptees who have been the on the other side of the spectrum and who have been the ones who have pushed against the rules and have been the disruptors um as much as not. And so I think it's more about like those two categories in the terms of those of us who fall into the compliance spectrum do so because of the survival mechanism, right? That we need to stay safe, that we need to not be abandoned again. And then the people that fall on the other side of the spectrum are the people that really push against everything and try to push all the buttons in order to prove that they're not worthy and to see how much they can get away with before people will leave them. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like two sides of the coin. And so sometimes I think in some cases it might be gendered, but I don't know that it's necessarily gendered.
Okay. I do like that explanation though, the disruptor versus the kind of complier. And I guess you could probably see that the best in the movie Lion as well. Because brothers, with that sort to be accurate.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great reference to make because yes, exactly. You had the one brother who was like, I'm going to do all the right things. I'm going to, be the good kid. And then the other brother was like, and I just say this, not to like just kind of a mess, right? Mm-hmm. And a part of it is, like they're adoptees as a population, we have higher rates of substance abuse and attempt or death by suicide because of not knowing our histories and not knowing where we came from and not having access to our biological relatives and not having access to appropriate mental health support. So there's a reason why there's higher rates of addiction in adoptee populations, and the higher rates of addiction often correlate to those adoptees who are the disruptors, who are, the ones who are not falling into line because they're because we're all hurting and we develop different coping mechanisms.
Yeah, definitely. I'll just throw it out there. I think you could probably be a little bit of both too, though. Like I was trying to put more like where would I fit in? And when I was younger, I think I tried to be more compliant in that regard. But then growing and then also just growing up as a brown man in the USA is like a whole nother complexity to this stuff. So because of that, and then also being adopted and then also wanting to prove myself, whether it's through sports or this or living in the weight room for whatever reason. Like, I also later found myself to be way more rebellious. Like, I want to go against the fray. I don't want to just stay in and study on the weekends. Like, I want to go out and do stuff and have fun. But then, later in life, that wasn't the best for me when it came to like things like drinking and so so yeah, I mean it's a mix, but I would just throw it out there that I think that maybe you could start as one, morph into another, or at different times in your life, maybe you could be the disruptor but also compliant. And so
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I've certainly vacillated. Like I have had, I had a period of time when there was I did a lot of rebellious things. Um, and like a lot, what would be considered very self-destructive, made some very self-destructive choices and very self-destructive behaviors. Sure. And again, all of this is just a pattern for a life that is built on shame, silence, and secrecy, and the unknowing of where I came from. And that is the truth of pretty much all adopted people that I know. And so we have a multiplicity of versions of ourselves across our lives as we're trying to figure out who we are and where we fit in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you brought that up, the where you fit in, because you brought up a good point of that people from the outside, whether you're in your position, my position, doesn't matter, any adoptee, that if you're with the assumption that if you grew up with a loving family, you should have no issues.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah. Yes. That's probably one of the most pervasive myths in the culture of adoption is this, like, if you grew up in a loving family, then there should be no problems, right? Like if you put a kid in a loving family, then what else do you need? And like the answer is like, love is not enough, because the external environment that we've been placed in, no matter how loving, how supportive, how like conducive to providing us with all of the material things that we need in terms of like comfort and security and safety and access to education and extracurricular activities and all the those are external pieces that are, yes, very important because they create safety and stability, but they don't address the internal experience that we're having. And so that's the cognitive dissonance, right? There's cognitive dissonance there when people make the argument that you put a kid, like that love is enough, or you put a kid in a loving home and there shouldn't be any problems there. But the deeper issue is that what nobody's accounting for is that that one family was created because another family had to be separated, and that there was a disruption and there was a separation of the most natural bond in the world, which is the bond of a mother and a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Talk about a disruption.
Mm-hmm. Which is probably a topic for a whole nother episode.
Would you say in general, yeah, well, see, it's hard for me to ask questions that way because a big portion of the population would think that we're playing the victim card, right? Even, just talking about this stuff, even just simply as openly as this, right? Oh, even though we had an hour conversation on it, like, well, you guys are fine. You guys look like you're doing fine to me. You and what are you even worrying about it now? Isn't all just money and relationships and being good with God or whatever, people say. So, but this is part of what you're talking about, though, that it's a lifelong journey, even though a lot of people would consider that I've found a lot of solutions for meeting my family, coming down here, literally living here for over a year, etc. But this ain't where it ends, you know?
Right.
Mhm. So yeah, I don't know if you want to just talk about like the continual journey. Uh,
Here's the thing I say a lot to all my fellow adopted people that I see on a regular basis, that work with me, that I know and love, that are my friends. We will never not be adopted. That is always a part of my identity that I can't ignore, that I can't erase. And while, yes, you and I might be very functional humans, right? Like we might be very functional, successful humans because we have overcome that, but that is because we have overcome a lot of things. There's a lot that goes unseen by many people that don't, and they don't recognize why we have had to overcome these things and why our lives are such a struggle. And that's the reason why we need to talk about it, so that more people are exposed to the truth, which is that adoption is a both and, right? We can both be, we can both be, we can be both, be both really thankful or grateful for the love and support and care that we have received in the lives that we have lived in the families that raised us. And we can also feel confusion and grief and sadness and maybe anger at the life that we didn't get to live with the family we were separated from. And it's not that we had a better life. In some cases, maybe, yes, that's true. Maybe we did have a better life. But I like to think, and I say that I've had this conversation with a lot of people, it's a different life. We've had a different life. We've had to learn to accommodate that.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly a different life, to say the least. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Hopefully people who are watching and listening, I think this will be part of a podcast series, at least for YouTube. But if YouTube accepts this as a podcast playlist. But anyways, we're gonna start wrapping stuff up here. But in general, I love this conversation. I guess just some of the last things I would ask are what your advice would be for young people, maybe even kids who are struggling or who eventually want to meet their first mother as you, or and beyond that. I'm gonna try to remember that term. So yeah, what's your overall advice for people who want to go down the path of you went down, I went down, meeting, or even just dealing with being an adoptee in this world?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is it's really important to find community, and there's lots of us out here in the world who are your people. So find your people, find your community, and reach out and connect with other adoptees who share the same experience, even if their identities are different. Because of the thing that I've learned in my own journey is that even though every single person that I know and have worked with, we have different, very different life experiences and identities, and like come from very different places. Our internal experiences are the same. And so when you connect with other adoptees, that's the first form of validation, right? And that's the first way of starting to come into discovering who you are, because you're not alone. There are other people who have felt the way that you feel and who have been down the road, who can guide you. The other thing is to make sure that you have support beside, in addition to community, that you have additional supports in place, that you have the support of other people in your life, whether it's an appropriate, therapist. That's been a super important part of my journey, is having an appropriate therapist as part of my support. but also some good friends. And some of them are not adopted people, you know, like many people I know are adopted people, but I do have a couple of really good friends who have been on this journey with me, who have struggled to understand, but then have come to understand, um, and find creative outlets, right? Because creativity is healing. And when we don't, sometimes when we don't have other ways to express, we can move some of the stuff that we're feeling by dancing, by making music, by drumming, by writing, by sculpting or painting. And so using your creative impulses to tell the stories that are living inside you, and know that what you want is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love your message about community for sure. Linking up with others who have had similar stories, definitely. And the creativity part, uh, that's super important, and especially guys, listen to that for sure. It's not all just about the gym life or whatever. No, learn an instrument, learn a song, learn to something musical. I always tell guys to, it's just good for you, right?
Yeah.
And it can be really cathartic.
Yes.
If you do any kind of, especially like, you do poetry. I do songwriting myself, so I know how, deep that stuff can really, help you get stuff out. And leaning into that, leaning into your creative side for sure. Absolutely agree with that 100%. Yeah. So if you have any last things, again, if you want to just plug your it's not a screenwriter. I keep saying screenwriter ebook, your play. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And anything else. And then I'll be sure to, like I said in the beginning, put links down below to, Dr. Liz, DeBetta's, website and other resources as well. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah. So if y'all are interested in more information, I have lots of offerings. I am committed to doing free community offerings every month. So you can find that information at my website, lizdebetta.com. Join my mailing list so that you stay in the know about that. My award-winning solo show Unmothered is available for booking, but there will be some upcoming screenings of it, because I just recently had the opportunity to get a video recording of it. And so I will be launching some invited screenings in November. So also another reason to get on my mailing list, so that if you want to see that and learn about that experience in a live talk back afterwards, that's how you do that. And my book, Adult Adoptees and Writing to Heal, is available on Amazon if you're interested in that. And I always welcome folks to reach out, just like you did, Ryan. Like, hey, I heard you on this podcast and I want to talk. So reach out, and I love to meet people. And throughout the year, I work one-on-one with folks who are interested in taking back their voice and their story. And I do that one-on-one and in small groups. And so like this weekend, I have a virtual retreat. That's just in a couple of days. So folks that watch and listen to this, this will probably be after that. So, but keep tabs, because I run some virtual retreats a couple times a year. And then I run virtual small groups for adoptees, as well as one-on-one coaching. So.
Wow. Great. You do a lot. I don't know how you do it in these short days, but you do a lot. That's great. Okay, you guys. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. But really, truly, it's been wonderful. I love this conversation, and I know it went really free flow. But these are important conversations to have for all the reasons that Dr. Liz DeBetta brought up, and like I always bring up as well. Especially if you are adopted and you think you're going through it alone, or you don't know how to navigate certain things, or you want to understand the reasons behind why you do certain things. And keep catching her on podcasts as well. You don't have YouTube, right?
I don't.
Yeah.
You can find something like some of my talks on YouTube and some things, but I don't currently have my own like YouTube thing because I have so many other things going on. So I like, but there's like a jillion podcasts that people can listen to if they're interested. Just Google me and like a whole bunch of stuff will come up. Trust me.
I have her name in on YouTube for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been great. And so hopefully people got quite a bit out of this. And yeah, maybe down the line we'll do another one of these. But we'll see. All depends.
Nowhere to find me.
All right. Okay, well, thanks everybody who joined in. Again, this is Ryan Aranda, My Best Life Paraguay, joined by Dr. Liz DeBetta. Again, everything is down below in the description. And comment in below what you guys think too, if you want to keep the conversation going. And and reach out and certainly visit her website and everything that she's doing. Get on our mailing list as well. I need to do that as well. So yeah, we're wrapping stuff up because my dog is annoying me right now. Go outside. Okay, you guys, take care and thanks again for joining us. All right.